Hey pet friends, welcome back to our podcast. Today we're starting a new episode for a brand new segment called The Expert. We have an animal control officer with us today, and she is going to share all of her stories and challenges and joys of helping to protect our animals in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah, so get ready. It's a fascinating world. Teresa and I were talking about it. We want all the stories because it's a really interesting profession. So trust me, you don't want to miss this. So hi, I'm Sarah. You're at Hey Pet Friends, the podcast.
And I'm Teresa, and we're just pet mamas trying to do the best for our pets.
So Teresa, let's get started.
Yeah, so we have Cindy Grimley Beason, and she's a former animal control officer from the San Francisco Bay Area. So welcome to Hey Pet Friends, Cindy.
Hey, it's so great to be here. I'm so excited to do this. This is going to be a great day. And I know you want all the stories, but we can't put all the stories out in this podcast. It would take a long time. I've been told I should write a book, but we're going to start with a podcast and see how that goes.
Okay, that sounds good. So we all take a path, college, to this job or that job, and then we land somewhere and we're like, yes, this is it. And we stay for a long time. So what is your origin story?
So I had always wanted to go to UC Davis and always wanted to be a veterinarian. And then as I worked with veterinarians, starting at age 16 was my first job at a vet hospital. The veterinarians were like, it's not worth it for the amount of schooling you do and the amount of debt you go into. Even back then, this is the 80s. And it was very competitive also back then at Davis, that once you get out, unless you have your own practice, which is not going to happen when you just get out of school, you're going to work for someone else. You just don't make the income. So I was essentially talked out of it by a couple different veterinarians who did it and were good at it and loved their work, but they're like, you know what, do something else. I ended up going to Davis anyway. I got a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife and Fisheries Biology. And then after kind of doing a desk management trainee job after college I didn't enjoy, I went back to working in a vet tech type role, but I was not an RVT, a registered veterinary technician. That career path was just kind of starting in the 80s and 90s. So a lot of vets would just have you come be like a vet assistant, even though you weren't school trained, but you were trained on the job. So I had a lot of experience with that. And then ultimately I started looking for jobs that had better benefits because those jobs were just basically a step above minimum wage, if that. And even today, and even back then, it was hard to survive back in the Bay Area on minimum wage. Yeah. Okay. So after I started applying for jobs, I was looking around, and back then in the olden days, there was no internet. You went through the want ads.
That's right.
You walked into places and filled out an application. That's how I got my first job in high school. Is I walked in like, "Hi, are you hiring?" And filled out the application, and they called me. So after I'm calling around these job lines, and you would call and you'd press the number and you'd listen on the following jobs are available, and you'd listen to this ongoing recording, and they had animal center technician. And I didn't know this, but it was alphabetical. So if I'd stayed on the line and not just said, oh, animal center technician, yeah, I'll take that. I'd press the number 1, you give them your address, and they send you an application. The job after that listed was animal services officer. So when I went to the interview for animal center technician, they were like, oh, it sounds like you'd make a great officer. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. They're like, oh, it just closed. Sorry, you'll have to wait till we open it again, which will be at least another year out. And I was like, oh, man. But I ended up taking the job as the tech, got a lot of valuable experience with animal handling and all the paperwork involved in a shelter environment. And so that's how I ended up
in the system, which is great, right, for transferring to a job.
Yes. So yes and no. There was I had to get my 832, which I put myself through 832, my arrest, search, seizure, and firearms training. What they did usually when they hired people is they would send you to 832, but I went ahead and did it on my own time. It was 2 weeks of intensive 40 hours a week plus weekends for like 2 weeks straight to get my certificate.
Is this like county specific? Is everything that you're talking about county specific?
For my county. Now, the problem with animal control agencies throughout the state is they're not all the same. They don't all have the same requirements. They don't all have the same job duties. Some agencies like ours, we carry sidearms. Most animal services officers do not throughout the state. There's only a handful that actually carry a sidearm. You'll have a rifle shotgun in the truck for dispatching wildlife, but you won't carry a sidearm. You won't wear a vest, things like that. So we were well equipped. I'll just leave it at that for any event, because we did a lot of assisting with search warrants. They would want us there with the entry team. So no one would have to start shooting dogs if they knew there was dope and dogs and things at the house. They don't want to start shooting. So then we would go in with the entry team to kind of snatch the dog at the front door, pull it out. And then that way it's quelled, because if anyone shoots a dog, then the owner it just escalates things. It was a way to keep everything de-escalated. And then the officers doing the entry aren't having to deal with the dog coming up on them and nailing them.
Wow, fascinating. I didn't think that.
Things you don't think about. It's not all puppies and kittens and fluffy ducklings. Yeah.
How long did it take you before you actually got into that position?
I just was looking at this because I was looking at some stories. I had the years wrong. I was a tech from 95 until about August of 96. And then I got promoted in 96. Then I was an officer. So I was just technically an officer, but occasionally I was getting sergeant pay while I trained other officers.
Why don't we just go into a story? You're floating on a spa cover. There's dead rats, and you're being pulled by the SWAT team.
Yes.
And there's kittens involved that are to be rescued. I mean, please, fill us in.
Wait,
This is great.
I want to know. This is like crazy. Like, where are the kittens? Are they in the spa? What's happening?
So it was a cat, not a kitten. And
Okay.
basically, keep in mind, this is before cell phones, before the internet, before GPS, all this stuff when I started. So there was no GPS. You had to navigate with a map everywhere. I was told to call into the office, which we gave us a calling card. We used to have to hunt down some payphones and dial the calling card. And, hi, what do you need? Like, well, they're doing some maneuvers at a property. Turns out the property had been seized. The property was seized in a drug seizure. And it seemed like every agency in the county and some from local counties were coming in. It was a 6,000 square foot home. It was a unique home. So it had lots of cubbies and stairs and weird setups. So they were using it as a training for every agent to go in there and try and clear a house. So it was a training exercise, unbeknownst to me. And while they were there, they discovered that in this pool area, which was approximately, I'm going to say like 40 to 50 feet long and 25 feet wide, not a standard backyard pool. This is a McMansion pool, right? So snare poles only go out to 8 feet. So there's no way to reach this cat. And this cat had swum up to what was like a grotto. So there was an area when the pool would have been working properly. There was a waterfall that came down from the upper spa over this opening, and then the cat was in there. So I guess the cat got spooked when all these people showed up at this property, because the property had been in disrepair and the pool had been not attended to for years while the case was being adjudicated. So now the case is adjudicated, they can then use it, and then they're going to sell it off later from the county. So I get there, like, yeah, there's a cat there in that, grotto. And I'm like, I have nothing long enough to reach it. We're looking around like, we need something 20 feet plus long to reach it. And I'm like, this isn't going to work. So these SWAT guys find the spa cover from the up above. That's a folding square spa cover that you would use to like cover a square spa. And they're like, oh, this will hold you. And I'm like, you think so? They're like, oh, yeah, it'll hold you. We'll tie ropes to the four corners. We'll pull you out there. I said, well, let's try just putting some cat food on it, floating it out there first. Maybe the kitty will jump on it.
Smart.
Let's work smarter, not harder, right? So I do this, and the cat's like, nope, I'm on you. I'm not getting on that thing. I swam here once. I'm not falling in the soup twice. So, okay. They pull the thing back, and I'm like looking at this other deputy there, and I'm like, she's trying to help me get on this floating spa cover. So I take off my duty belt. I'm laying down like akimbo, like a water bug, all four, pushing pressure on all four corners so it doesn't tip and it doesn't do this. And the deputy hands me my snare pole. I'm like, well, I'm not even going to take a cage because I don't want to be futzing with a cage on a raft in this. And it's a black algae pool. There's dead rats floating in it. It was nasty. So I'm looking on this. And I'm like, okay, guys, let's go. So two guys on one side, and they're like, boop, 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 and they're pulling it. I'm like, slow down, because the water's starting to wake up over the front. I'm like, no, I don't want to swallow this water. I get out there, and the kitty goes as far back as she possibly can into this grotto. I'm like, God. So I'm laying on my belly. I'm using my snare. And I'm like, come on, kitty, get her. I pull her. I bear hug her on the side like a football. Okay, back. So we're pulling her back. As we're pulling her back, kaboom. This kaboom sound goes off. I'm like, what the hell was that? And they're all, oh, sorry, I guess I should have told you they're setting off flashbangs in the house. Oh, good God. So I nearly went in the soup with the cat. Oh, I'm like, tighten it up, tighten it up. So they're pulling me back. I hand the cat off to the deputy. Cat was fine. I'm like flipping off, like trying to do a spider push-up and flip onto the pool deck. If I had to do that again older, I wouldn't do it. But, I was young. It was, I was more adventurous. Kitty went back. It was all good. Kitty didn't live there, obviously.
Well, it sounds like you went to a lot of dangerous situations.
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes some pretty sketchy neighborhoods and sketchy situations,
I didn't be backup for police officers. That's interesting.
And we worked solo. We didn't have another person in the truck with us unless you were training. So usually you're solo. So if you call for an animal control assist, depending where they are, you're talking a 30-minute ETA sometimes.
So what happens to the cat at this point?
Oh, so when we pick up any stray cat, back then there weren't chips. Now we would scan it for a microchip. If it's not chipped, bring it to the shelter, vaccinate it, give it a dewormer and a flea control, put a collar on it, take a picture, put it in a kennel, and then information goes on the website. Back then we just didn't have microchips. So now we have chips, which are great, but only great if people keep them current and registered. We pick up a lot of animals that the chips are not current, and it's sad because you knew it was someone's pet at some point. And there's no way to trace it.
Oh, I don't even know that.
Yeah.
Better check your stuff. Make sure. And if you don't know,
He's not even a year yet, but I'm going to do that now. I'm going to ask about that.
We have one of our dogs chipped, but I don't even really know how it works, to be honest with you.
You can go to a site, I think it's a AAHA chip registry, and you can put the chip in there and it'll tell you what chip manufacturer it is. And then you can contact that chip manufacturer and see if you're current. You might have to pay a fee to register it or what have you. But please do that if people are out there, have pets and don't know, or you got the dog from a friend of a friend of a friend and you don't know if it was chipped. Yeah. Any vet can scan it for you. Any shelter can scan it for you just to get you the chip information, and then you can register it from there.
Interesting. I learned something already.
Yeah.
Well, here's something. So there's the shelter, or they used to call it the pound, right? So it's the shelter facility, and then there's your job. How do they mix?
So there's differences between a public shelter, or the pound as it's called, and a rescue organization or an SPCA.
Yeah.
Different entities. So in San Francisco, there's San Francisco Animal Care and Control, and then there's San Francisco SPCA down the street. So there's two entities there. Animal Care and Control is the one that has the officers that goes out. The SPCA is usually strictly for adoptions. Now, there's sometimes SPCA humane officers, and there's a state humane officer. That's a whole nother ball of wax. Ours was the mandated pound. We are mandated to impound all strays, all sicks, all injures. But whereas a rescue or an SPCA or Humane Society can pick and choose what comes through their door. So they only take in animals that they know they can rehab or they know they can adopt.
And then they give them to you if the answer is no to that.
Usually they're taking them from us. Our shelter owes a debt of gratitude to all the rescues that do come in and take animals from us that are hard luck cases. And there's really good rescues out there. That being said, there's also some sketchy rescues out there. It's just like with anything. So what happens is we'll get like an influx of dogs from a cruelty case or whatever. You got a bunch of chihuahuas or something, and we're housing them, and it's going to be a long case. We've got to get them out into foster. They can't necessarily be adopted, but we don't want to hold them at the shelter for months and months and months while the case gets adjudicated. So we try and work with rescues to help us out to get these animals at least into a home environment, which is a lot less stressful than a shelter.
Yeah. I mean, fostering is a whole different thing. My neighbors did that. They only did German Shepherds. And so that's a whole nother world we could talk about.
Yeah, that's a whole nother, go down a rabbit hole on that. But
exactly.
I have a question. So how many cases would you say that you dealt with where somebody actually called in, like a neighbor called in or just a concerned citizen called in? Did you get a lot of those?
Cases in inhumane, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, we think you drive around the street and find animals.
No,
yeah.
No.
Like how do you like?
We do that too. We do that too, but
Yeah.
most of our stuff is dispatched. So someone calls a shelter, whether they're complaining about an animal loose or a sick animal or an injured animal, hit by car dog, hit by car cat, or they're getting, hey, I think my neighbor's beating their dog, or I saw my neighbor shooting birds out of the tree next door. We get all of those. So we're usually going to bite reports where someone got bit, or inhumane investigations. Those are our primary calls that we're handling, at least as the career went on. That's what it became. When I first started, there was parts of our county were not as developed, so we had a lot lower population. So one part of the county was kind of like, you could just go out there and pick up dogs all day long because you weren't getting a lot of calls out there. Now it's totally changed. It's all organized everywhere. And then you get more wildlife interactions with dogs where your dog kills the skunk and then the skunk's got to go to the health department for rabies testing. And there's that aspect too. So our main goal is rabies control through bites and then animals versus wildlife. Then we get into the inhumane stuff where you don't want to hear about.
Or then you pick up animals that have obviously been hit by cars and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
But I love what you're doing in Los Angeles with the overpasses. That's only for wildlife to get from one place to another. I mean, we are improving, right? As a society around wildlife.
Yeah, and that's where you have these people who are like complaining about the ground squirrels and they're digging up their yard and they back up to a hillside. It's like, well, what do you expect? You know, they were there before your house was there, you know?
Exactly. I have a question. My uncle has had a friend. He hoarded animals.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, he was to feral cats, hundreds of them. And he was in Los Angeles with a hillside. There's lots of wildlife in that part of Los Angeles. But you like him. His neighbors liked him. But it was bad because coyotes and bobcats, and they would hurt the other animals in the neighborhood. So he's bringing that in. It's also the smell from the street. It's also his health because he had a stroke. Your job has to have so much empathy because
yes,
like, what do you do with these hoarders?
Yes, and I've been on way too many hoarder cases where I've had to put on the Tyvek suit and slide through a tunnel to get into the house, and it's ultimately a mental illness. That's ultimately what causes it. Usually something triggers it where they just feel they have to hang on to everything, whether it's pets or newspapers or canned food or whatever. I've been on a lot of those. With cats, it was always more difficult, especially if they were outdoor, because it's really hard to prove ownership on a cat. Someone say, well, I just feed it. It's not my cat. It's just outside. He's not mine. But then you walk up and there's 30 cats and 20 feeding stations. You're like, well, why are you putting food? Well, I can't bear to turn them away. And then you have to explain to them that every time you feed that cat, you are expanding the pet population. You're giving them more nourishment than if they were having to hunt for food. Their litter numbers would naturally stay down. But by giving them that fat source and that energy and that food all the time, they have bigger and bigger litters, and then they can have 4 litters a year and exponential growth. And then I just fed 2 and now there's 15. And sometimes people do it like 1 or 2 and they think it's not a big deal. And they come out a year later and they got 30 cats. And they're like, well, you shouldn't have fed those 2 last year. So you have to kind of educate the citizen that you can't be feeding them or wildlife. That's
Is there any way? Now, I have a friend who she bought a house in San Francisco and she had a bunch of feral cats that were in the backyard. So she was feeding them, but what she was also doing was she went to the SPCA or the shelter and she didn't buy it. They gave her, yes. And she would trap them and then she would take them back to the SPCA. They would vet them, spay them, neuter them, and then they'd give them back to her and she would release them back into the backyard. And now she doesn't have any. She has none. So she had like a whole yard full, and now she has, this has been years though. This has been years and years and years, and now she has none. So is that the type of education that you're also giving?
That's called TNR, Trap, Neuter, Return. And we do a lot of that within our county. We also have a barn cat program with my department, where if you have a cat that's like kind of sketchy, kind of feral, It's already fixed. It probably shouldn't go in a home with kids, but it'd make a great hunter and barn cat. And we have some rural properties out here that will take barn cats that just kind of live in the barn and keep the mice down. But TNR, if you ever see a cat outside, it's got the tip of the ear missing, that's usually been fixed as part of a TNR colony, or it was a trap neuter release. They try and release them back in the same general vicinity where they were found, because they kind of have an established hierarchy within them. And then eventually, like in the case of your friend who had a bunch, TNR'd them years later, now there's none. That's kind of the goal, to kind of keep those numbers down. But they're, you drive the neighborhood 4 blocks away, I'm sure that someone there's feeding the cat, and the cycle continues. But I think a lot more people are more aware of TNR than they were even 10 years ago.
So what about exotic pets? Have you come across like
what kind? Like the most exotic that you encountered?
I've seen some exotic parrots. I had one that was riding shotgun in the truck with me in a box, and it just kept laughing and talking. And I would laugh, it would laugh. We were just having this conversation. I was like, oh my God. The owner came and got it, by the way. But, and birds can be chipped too, by the way. Parrots can be chipped. They're usually chipped in the chest, just so you know. I have had a few chipped parrots. But other strange creatures, maybe not exotic, were the emus that I had some years ago. Also, we've had sugar gliders come in.
What's a sugar glider?
It's like it's a little like marsupial, looks like kind of like a flying squirrel, and they kind of glide. They're cute as heck, but they're not legal. And when we would get weird and unusual, like exotics that weren't even from this country, like they're from South America or something, sometimes we'd have Marine World or another wildlife take it from us, and then Science Fish and Wildlife would take animals and then ship them out to I had a couple snapping turtles I picked up, which are not native here, but they would get sent back to Louisiana or wherever they came from.
Are they dangerous? They're snappy?
Yeah, I picked up one that was so big. I mean, I had to put him on a snare pole diagonal across the carapace, and I had to hoist him up. He probably weighed 40 pounds. And I got him up, I got him in. I'm like, I guess I'm taking me. So I brought him in. I remember the next day, my supervisor's like, let me see your fingers. You still have them all, because that's a big snapper. I'm like, yeah, I got them all. Oh, wait, no, just kidding.
I mean,
so exotics are usually parrots. We do have a couple people who have zebras in our county. There's a camel. There's some buffalo. This is way before my time. We have pictures at the shelter of 2 African lions in a dog kennel.
No.
That were apparently seized from like some Hells Angels in the 70s. I don't know much about it other than the pictures that I saw and what my other coworkers had told me.
That would have been a fun call.
Not fun.
It would have been interesting.
Yeah.
So this is just a fun question. Like, if you had a superpower for one day in your job, what would it be, and how would you use it?
Oh, I think mind reading.
Okay.
Because I would encounter people a lot of times who would just lie right to my face, and I knew they were lying, but sometimes you can't quite prove it. And especially with like cruelty cases and hoarding cases. Oh no, I only have the 10 dogs. Really? Okay. What's in that room back there? Oh, I don't go in that room. No. Then you go in there, there's 17 more dogs back there. So yeah. So I think getting lied to was my biggest pet peeve. When people would lie, or they send their kids out to lie to me. That was really bad. Yeah. So mind reading would be my thing. I just would like to know exactly what they're thinking before I get there.
I commend you, because I just could not do it. I mean, I just, on multiple levels, like, first of all, I would just be so upset if I encountered an animal who was being, hurt in any particular way. It would just drive me crazy. And I don't think I could do it. Honestly. So, I commend you for like doing this, and for doing it for like a wide span of a career.
Almost 30 years. Yeah. 28 and some. When I would train people, I'd say the dog or the cat or whatever, if you have a righteous cruelty case, you're going to write a case and DA is going to take it. You have to write your report so that anybody reading it knows exactly what happened, because that dog can't testify. That cat can't testify. It's not like when you have people who can swear a statement. we do take statements from citizens, don't get me wrong, but when we have a cruelty case, often the victim is dead. So they can't testify. So what has to testify is the report writing, the interviews from witnesses, the veterinary report, the necropsy, if that's what happened. So we want to make sure that we get a conviction, and it's hard. It's really hard to get a conviction with animal cruelty stuff. Sometimes it's the DA doesn't want to take the cases because they find a little hole and they want a slam dunk case, or they want to just plead it out. I've had many people plead out cases. Most of our stuff would get pled out. There'd be a handful that actually went to jury trial, but most of our stuff got pled out. And I just think I would always tell my trainees, it's like, you need to think about it from the pet's perspective, and you got to kind of take yourself out of it. And we would come across cases that were not chargeable under cruelty, but they were not ideal. So then in those cases, your goal is to educate that pet owner of how they can make it better.
Yeah.
You can't tie your dog up to a tree for 24/7. We would actually give out cable runners, and we would do things to help people who didn't have a fence. We don't want them to surrender the dog because they love the dog, but we want to make that dog's environment better.
Yeah. Oh, I just love that. That's how you trained people. Like you're the voice for this pet. I mean, I never thought about that. It's so many things I have misconceptions about. That is just beautiful. That is really nice.
Yeah. And when I was talking, one of my coworkers swung by here recently, and I trained him 10 years ago. And I was like, what do you think? He's like, well, you were always if I screwed something up, you always said, well, let's reflect on this. What could we have done different? How should we have changed it? I was never one to yell at anybody unless their life was in danger, in which case I'd grab them and pull them. But I was never one to you screwed up, blah, 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 blah. And even when I had some trainees that had map navigation issues, which there were a few because we didn't have GPS, and I was a stickler for learning the map. Some of them hated me for it, but they gave me gray hair. But I was very much, you have to know how to read a map, because when the GPS goes out, you got to know how to get from point A to point B. And I just remember this one girl, she would make a turn, and I'm like, you bite your tongue, you let them make their mistakes. And then she's like, I don't know where I am. I'm like, what street are we on? And she names a street. Okay, let's make a right. Now what street are we on? We're on this. I said, okay. So as we get back on track, I said, and you didn't make a wrong turn. You learned 3 more streets. That's how I would phrase it. And back before the internet, and before when I very first started, we used to have to write down on what was called a route sheet, our lefts and rights between calls. So we would go to 123 Main Street. You put how much time you were there and what you were there for. And then your next line was Main Street, Pine, First, right on this. And so you learn the whole county. I can name a street. My husband calls me his CPS, his Cindy positioning system, because I don't need a map. I can it's in the corner of this and that. Yeah, let's just go. A call would come through on the radio, and I would know from the address what the cross street was without them saying, or that the address they had was wrong, because I knew it was 4 digits on that street, not 3. And I'd be like, call the reporting party back. That's a bad address. And they'd be like, oh, well, that's what she gave me. I'm like, call her back. It's a bad address. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Have you ever gotten injured on the job?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was there not even a month as a tech, and I had probably one of the worst dog bites they had at the shelter. I got bit on my arm, both arms, my back, my buttocks. I got mauled pretty bad. And everyone thought I was going to quit. Everyone thought, oh, she's going to quit. She's only been here a month. She just got munched by a chow. Nope, she's going to quit. And I came back. And I've been bit by many dogs. I had my worst bite, though, infection-wise, was from a cat. I had 17 punctures in my arm, and I was having to go in and get it packed with the wicking stuff where they run it through your arm and then it drains. I was going in and out of the ER every day for IV antibiotics and having my wounds repacked. And yeah, that was a bad one. I've wrecked many joints, which is part of the reason I retired. It got to the point where even the workman's comp doc was like, you need to think about retiring. I think she was tired of seeing me because it seemed like every 3 months I was in there for something. She's like, you need to think about it, because we can put you back in the field, but the next time you might not fare so well. So, and I've had some surgeries and things like that. And I just decided, you know what, it wasn't worth the risk, because I've had coworkers who've had back spews, who've had blown knees and just retired, and then they were basically crippled. I didn't want to have that happen to me. And I had coworkers over the years say, don't wait till you're crippled. get out if you need to get out. So that's why I pulled the trigger about 18 months early and left. Retired.
I think it sounds like you put in a lot. So I think you're okay to retire. Do people want to go into this profession, or is it?
So it's funny. I was just at my bar method. One of the gals there her daughter was seeking to go into vet school, and I could hear them talking. And she goes, but it's so expensive and this and that. She goes, but what other career could she do that's not just, working in a vet hospital? And I'm like, I can tell you one. And so I chimed in. I'm like, hey, if she wants to do a ride along, if she puts in an application, I'll let her do a ride along. So anyone out there who's interested, just know it's a lot more dealing with citizens, and the pets and stuff are usually secondary because you're usually educating them, whether it's quarantine education, humane education. We also pick up deceased animals. You're going to come home smelling like a skunk sometimes. It's a fun job. I would do it again in a heartbeat. Just don't get injured. But, you can't predict what an animal's going to do. I had a dog on a pole once. I was putting it in the truck, and I pulled him back to run him back in a second time because he balked, and he nailed me on the thigh. I was like, God dang it, just get him in the truck and then drive yourself to the ER.
I have actually called several times to animal control officers and not even connecting all of it. But just recently in January, it was like raining like tons in where I live. I was walking my dogs they won't go to the bathroom in the backyard. So I walk them all the time. And so I'm out there with my umbrella, my 2 dogs, poop bags, and I'm walking by the sewer, and I hear an animal screaming. Like absolutely screaming. I cannot take it. I go over there looking to see if I can see anything. I can't see anything. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I got to do something, and I can't just not do anything. So I went home and I called animal control, and the lady I talked to, she said, oh, we have somebody who's at the other end of your street checking on the same thing. All the way up.
It was in the pipe, probably. Yeah.
Yes. And I was like, okay, are they going to come here though? And she's like, yeah, I'll have them come there. And so then he called me, and I was like, well, I'm back out here again, but I don't hear it now. And he goes, well, I think I probably won't come. I'm like, please come. I'm like, please. And he's like, okay. He's like, calm down. He's like, I will come. So he came, and he was like, with his flashlight, and he goes, what happens is, sound travels. So this animal could have been anywhere, really. And you could just hear it. And he's like, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the animal's hurt. The animal might not be hurt, but maybe he's nesting or she's nesting, and another animal is coming in their space, and that's why they're making this noise. So anyway, he made me feel better.
Yes.
I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And that's our goal, is we always want everyone to leave an interaction with us feeling better about the interaction they've had. I mean, sometimes you go on these calls and people are hostile right out the gate. You have to let them vent for a minute. And then you're like, well, that's fine and dandy, but that's not why I'm here. And then they're like, wait, because they think they've got it all figured out. And maybe that's why you're there. But I always let people vent, because then you can kind of hear what's really going on. Maybe you're called there for something else, and maybe it is a neighbor issue, and then they're calling to complain and whatever. That's a lot of that. But you can kind of hear what the real issue is by letting them vent. And then you kind of let them come down, let them get it out of their chest, and then you try and explain why you're there. And a lot of times I've had people who I've written tickets to, like, you're so nice. You're so nice, as they're signing their ticket. I'm like, well, it doesn't do me any good to not be nice, and you're not going to sign the ticket, if I'm going to be a jackass to you, then you're going to be a jackass back. So yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Right? It really is empathy.
Somebody has that behavior, you're sitting on the curb. I'll deal with you. You sit there. I'll talk to you in a minute. Stop talking. Don't say a word. That kind of stuff. I can play it both ways, but always start low key.
I once was shocked with the citation, how much it would cost. Because my uncle lived 2 houses down from his partner for 40 years. So his partner died, and the nephews were going to sell the house, and they didn't want Carrie. Carrie's the little dog. But he was a big, fluffy dog, mean. And so we took him, and then he bolted out of the gate one day. This woman saw him, and he was just wandering around. This woman put her hand down, and he nipped her finger.
Yeah.
So the other neighbor said, call animal control. They don't have any fencing in the back, which we did. And so when we got the notice, it was a lot of things. The woman actually found out that the dog was just recently rehomed, and that was his partner. And she does see our gate, and she said she's not going to press charges, but still the city to go ahead. And they said they were going to charge. We had two dogs, my dog and now this dog, and they said they were going to charge us $800, $400 per pet if we didn't have all these things in order. So it took me a while, and all we had to pay for was a license. We didn't have to pay anything else because they walked around. We had fencing. Everything was good. It's just we didn't have licenses for our dogs.
License your dogs, people. Yeah.
But it was good. They were going to charge us like $800, $400 per animal.
Yeah, because if they picked up the dog, there was like an impound fee, quarantine daily board, and then if it was during COVID, I know a lot of fees got waived or reduced. But the licensing fee will get you every time. I'm just going to warn you. That's the one thing. No, there's no walking. We see a dog loose. Depending why we're there, if we're called for it, that's one thing. If we just happen by it, we can say, "Hey, can you leash your dog?" If the person leashes it and is respectful, then usually you might walk them on the at-large. You could sign them for the at-large, but it depends on how they behave. If they're F you, it's like, okay, you just earned a citation. Yeah, not the right answer. Oh, and it's not licensed either. Well, now you're going to get 2 tickets. Yeah. So we can always kind of have some discretion on the at-large as long as we, just happened upon it, unless you're called for it. There's a guy who runs a boxer loose every day at 5:00. You go there and he's loose, you're going to write that ticket. Yeah.
But they allowed you in Los Angeles to purchase 3 years in full instead of just doing it a year. So,
that's how long the rabies is valid for. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was great because I'm going to forget.
Before I moved here, the other place that I lived in, they would just send me it in the mail. Like the county would just send it to me in the mail, and I'd be like, okay, great. I'll just go ahead and like send it back, and I don't have to worry about it. But here they don't do that, and you have to like go to the place and show them the tag that says they've gotten the rabies, and I'm like, I'm going to screw this up. One of these days, I'm not going to do it because I'm going to forget.
They don't do it online. They don't do it online?
No. I went to the vet, got Olivia, and they didn't know she had the rabies shot because she was 3. And they're like, well, we're just going to give it to her again. And I was like, okay. And then she gave me the tag, and she goes, okay, now you got to go take this to this place, and that's how you get your license. And I'm like, I have to take this someplace? And I'm like, don't they just send it to you? And then she's like, no.
Huh, that's interesting. Yeah. No, we used to do our licensing in-house, and then we farmed it out to a third party that's like in Texas. So now it's all online, which is great if people know how to scan it. But some of the older folks, I mean, come on, they're not doing that. They want to come in, they want to pay their fee and get their tag. I get it, And now we give what's called a lifetime tag. So once you get your tag, he keeps that number for the dog's lifetime. Unless you lose it, then you got to pay a replacement fee. So you keep that same license tag. You have to renew it, just like your license on your car stays the same. You just get a new sticker. So the same concept, but it's all online now for us. Or you can do it in person at the shelter.
I had to go for this citation. I had to go to all these places.
Sorry.
I was not a uncle, so he finally put a latch on the door, on the gate, because he's like old. He's like going to be 90 this November. So he's come from Ireland. He's like, they wander around. I'm like,
yes, different generation. Yeah. People don't realize, even though a dog bite might be minor, the person can still sue you civilly.
Yeah.
And your dog doesn't have to bite somebody to injure somebody. And we've had case, this was years and years ago, dog ran around the court. Everyone on the court loved the dog. Big, bouncy yellow lab, friendly as a bug. All the kids played with it. No problem. No one on the court complained. No issues. Someone's elderly mother was visiting for a holiday, went out to get the mail or the newspaper, and here comes bouncy yellow lab, knocked her down, broke her hip. She died later in the hospital because of a nososarcomial infection. And then, they got sued for wrongful death.
Yeah, exactly.
And the dog didn't bite her.
No.
But it caused the injury because it was at large. Yeah. So it's rare until you're on the receiving end of that lawsuit. You don't think it'll ever happen. And then it happens, And I've seen a lot of civil stuff go on with dog versus dog stuff and dog biting people, and that the fights may or may not be severe ones, obviously, but we had one where the dog ran up on some lady and the extendable leashes, which are not legal in our county, by the way, anymore. Wrapped this little lady up by the ankles and boom, she went down and hit her head on the concrete. The other dogs that were loose never touched her, but her dogs panicked and ran circles around her, and then she got cinched up and went down.
Yeah, it's a fascinating career. And I think that you are not atypical, right? You are
Yes.
probably a little more educated, a little more empathetic to people. That's what I gather.
Yeah. With the home, especially with the homeless, because we would go to homeless encampments a lot. And when
we were talking about this earlier.
All the time, and we know they love their pet.
Yes, they do. And I guess just generally when I was one of my homeless men was actually a witness for a cruelty case that occurred in the park. And so I had to track him down, like, hey, do you know where so-and-so is? Like, oh, he rides a bike. He's over there. So, I'm driving around all the camps to find him, talking to him. And he gives me his ID because I'm taking his statement. And I look at the picture on the ID and I'm looking at this guy in front of me and I'm like, not his real name. Joe, what happened to you? What happened to this guy? And he's like, oh, it's the alcohol. I just can't stop drinking. So we had some really, really good conversation about it. And there's quite a few homeless people. I don't want to say they know me by name, but they know me by face because I've been in their encampments. Every homeless person has a story. It's not always drugs and alcohol. Sometimes it's not always mental illness. Sometimes it's stuff way beyond their control and stuff you would not imagine in your wildest dreams. And I think you have to be sensitive to that for everybody. You never know what anyone else is going through. You can't assume that you know everything going in, and you have to take the time to listen to somebody. And even whether they're angry and venting or they're just having a crap day, you just need to take that time and listen to them. And then you can go on with what you need your purpose of being there is for.
Yeah.
I just saw this a couple months ago of this woman in Texas. She went to the bathroom and there was a snake in the toilet. Have you ever had anything like that?
When I first started, we would shoot all rattlesnakes. We would get lots of rattlesnake calls and we would just euthanize them all. We don't do that anymore. Now we relocate them. But I picked up corn snakes, king snakes, gopher snakes, rattlesnakes, boa constrictors.
If you could tell your younger self starting out, would you start out doing this job?
I probably would have still done this job. In hindsight, I have a degree. I'm glad I went to college. I put myself through David, but you don't need to have a college education for this particular job because it's treated as an entry level. It's a lot of on-the-job training. I would do it again. I just don't know. In hindsight now, knowing what I know, I don't know that I might have started sooner. I might not have finished my degree at Davis, but I did love my time at Davis. I love, I'm the bird nerd of the department. I know all the birds. I still get texts occasionally from coworkers. Hey, what kind of bird is this? And we had a guy once, he had a cruelty case. He got this kid on video shooting birds out of a tree. I'm looking over his shoulders. He's typing his report and he's writing the sparrow, the sparrow, the sparrow. I'm like, well, are they sparrows? And he's like, well, I don't know. I think they're sparrows. And I'm like, there's 17 different species of sparrows in California. So I peek in the bag. I'm like, they're not sparrows. They're yellow-rumped warblers. And they're also protected under the Migratory Bird Act. So you have an additional charge you can send off to Fish and Game. And he's like, oh, okay. I'm like, Dad, I changed all sparrows to yellow-rumped warblers. So he's having to go through his whole report. Yellow hyphen small r,
Of course it is. Everyone knows that.
So I would get a coworker. He's like calling me. He's like, hey, I got this bird. I thought it was injured, but I don't think it is now. I'm like, well, where'd you get it? Okay. Was it on the ground? Yeah. Okay. Does it have like a dark band and it's white? He's like, yeah. I said, go put it back. It's not injured. It's a killdeer. And he's like, huh? It's one of those birds that fakes an injured wing to lead you away from the nest. So he thought it was injured.
You should write a book.
I should. You really should.
I've had people tell me that for years and years. It's just, I feel like when I start writing stuff down, you can't get the tone across as well. I think it is more natural for me.
What's your next step for you?
We want to travel some more. I've always wanted to go to Italy. It's been on my bucket list for a while. So is Croatia and
go to
Japan.
Croatia.
Japan, because my husband actually lived in Japan when he was younger. Wow. So I think it would be fun to go back for him to kind of see where he grew up. He speaks more Japanese than he lets on, but yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, travel is a must. Yeah, I think we all should do it.
We appreciate you coming on here, being candid, and telling us all of the stories.
It was great to have you, and I'm glad we all connected.
We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for watching. We hope you join our vibrant community of pet mamas and dads who, like us, are passionate about their pets and want the very best for them.
And a big thank you to our guest, Cindy Grimley Beason, former animal control officer. There's a great quote in this podcast from Cindy. If you have a righteous cruelty case, you have to write your report so that anyone reading it knows exactly what happened, because that dog can't testify. That cat can't testify. You are their voice. So a big thank you for sharing your invaluable experience, your amazing, heroic, funny stories from almost 30 years of service, and reminding us how to be the voice for animals. Hey, Cindy, by the way, you should write that book.
We love sharing our pet journey with you, but we are not professionals. So everything we share comes from our personal experiences, and it's just our opinion. So please always consult with a qualified professional for your pet's specific needs. We post a new episode every Wednesday, and you can find us at Hey Pet Friends across all social media and heypetfriends.com on our website. See you next Wednesday.